This little video will be about the dawn of air power in World War I. And now we're not just talking about airplanes here. We're talking about hot air balloons and steerable balloons like dirigibles. Let's start with the hot air balloon. The hot air balloon was used on either side of the trench on the Western Front, and you put your hot air balloon over there, you get some binoculars, and it was used as a reconnoitering point. It's a spot to do some scouting and reconnaissance, and from that hot air balloon, you could see where the enemy was on the other side of the trench and calling your shots for the artillery fire to make a barrage to weaken the forces for some sort of offensive. But that turned out to not be very safe as other planes are coming over, and hot air balloons aren't the most difficult thing to shoot down. Later, when it comes to air, dirigibles or steerable balloons become the most popular choice. For example, the Germans used the Zeppelin, and this large steerable balloon, think of like a blimp, think of the Goodyear hot air blimp, that's what the Germans have, except they're dropping bombs out of them. And they go over to London, and they're gonna drop bombs and terrorize the people of London and make their attacks in that way, doing some aerial bombing. For fixed-wing aviation, it also began as just a reconnaissance point. And you take your plane, you take your biplane over there, and you fly over, and you turn, and you take a look at the enemy line, and you report back to your superior. And most of the time, they got some pretty good reconnaissance from that. You take pictures, you could have a guy behind you taking some pictures, you could take some photos. Now, the reconnaissance wasn't always great. There was one time an Allied pilot came back and said, man, the Germans are completely out of control, they're in disarray, they're retreating, they're running around like chickens with their head cut off. And what he actually saw was a soccer game going on behind the German line. So, the reconnaissance wasn't dead on, but the Allied commanders got great reconnaissance overall from aviation. So how does aviation switch from, just reconnoitering to dogfighting and battles in the sky and air power in the sky? Well, the pilots kind of take that on. The pilots are flying, and it used to be you just, if you're an Allied pilot, you just, make a little wave at the German pilot you see, but the chivalrous mindset starts to decay, and next thing you know, they're pulling out pistols and shooting at each other and shotguns and carrying machine guns on board, and dogfights begin in the sky. And both the field is going to develop to support that. A rear gunner becomes very common. Your guy who takes pictures also gets a Vickers gun or a Lewis gun to fight in the air. Before long, they say, you know what, instead of having just a rear gunner, it would be helpful if on the front of my plane, I had some sort of gun, had some sort of machine gun to hunt down different planes. So the first thing they do, you gotta remember, they've got propellers. Now, they have a push plane with one with the propeller on the back, so you can put a machine gun on the front of those, but they're not as good. With your planes with the propellers on the front, how do you shoot through the propeller without tearing it up? Well, they cover the propellers in steel. They say, the bullets will bounce off. Well, that works, but it's pretty reckless. The next thing you know, you're shooting your machine gun, and the bullets bounce back and kill the pilot himself. The big change comes with Anthony Fokker. He's from the Netherlands. He develops what's called the synchronization gear. And the Germans get this first, and it's where, as the propeller shoots, the machine gun only shoots between the propeller blades. And this is a huge advantage for the Germans. It's a huge advantage overall for aviation and fighting in the air, as the synchronization gear allows for all sorts of dogfights to take place and planes continue to develop. Of course, the dawn of air power is in World War I, but air power is going to continue from this point forward to be a crucial part to every war and operation, even unto this day. So thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great one.